Well, welcome to the Paid Family Leave Teletown Hall. I am so excited to be talking about one of my favorite subjects with a group of super smart individuals. I'd like to start with some introductions. Representative Sylvester, if you want to kick us off and introduce yourself. You are on mute. It would not be a Zoom without several rounds of you're on mute. So thanks for breaking the ice there.
No problem, Dusty. So I'm Representative Mike Sylvester. I am the representative of the East End of Portland and the Fighting Islands of Casco Bay. I am the chair of the Labor and Housing Committee, and I've been one of the representatives working on trying to shape the legislation that's in front of us right now. And looking forward to chatting a little bit about what family medical leave is, why it's important, and what folks can do to bring it to fruition.
Great. Kathy?
Sorry, I'm having a little bit of technical issues, but thank you. I'm Kathy Kilrain Del Rio. I am really passionate about paid leave, have had several experiences in my own life where I've needed it and heard the stories of hundreds of Mainers who also have had similar challenges, and excited to be able to talk a lot about why we need it now and how you can help.
Great, thank you. James.
Hi, I'm James Myall. I'm a policy analyst at the Maine Center for Economic Policy. I've been working on the paid family leave issue in Maine for a couple of years now, and excited to be talking about what I think is becoming an increasingly important policy for everyone right now.
Wonderful. And I'm Holman Sprague. I'm the executive director of the Maine Women's Lobby. We are happy to be leaders of the Maine Paid Family Leave Coalition and have been working on this issue for a number of years. I also want to point out that Logan Mills, our community organizer, is not visible, but is doing some back-end work. So if you are watching on Facebook, Logan is the person helping out. If you have any questions that you would like to chat in, we are happy to take those questions, take comments from the public, and Logan is over there working the Facebook and making sure that we are able to see all of that. So don't be shy with your questions or comments. Logan's going to drop into the Facebook Live a little poll that you can click on if you're watching this right now, and just let us know where you're watching from so that we can get a sense of where our audience is from, because it's kind of fun to see that. I also wanted to take just a quick minute before we launch in and show you, if you are looking for more resources and you're not able to stick with us all the way to the end, I want to share some resources for you right at the beginning. MaineFamilyLeave.com has a variety of information about paid family leave, about actions that you can take as a citizen, facts about the issue, a ton of really beautiful stories from Mainers, just like us, just like you. I see Kathy there. So don't be shy about heading over to MaineFamilyLeave.com if you can't stick with us for this whole conversation today, because there are more resources over there. So to jump on in, because we only have an hour, and I know we could all talk about this for a lot longer than that, except we have to get our kids to bed. So let's talk a bit about why paid family leave matters. What is it about this policy that is different from other kinds of leave and that is so important for Mainers right now? Who wants to kick that off?
Oh, go ahead, Representative.
Go ahead, Kathy. You first.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I was just going to say, I think one of the things about paid leave that's so important to keep in mind is that people need it across their lives as workers. So it really at some point could help every single Maine or every single Maine family. People need it because they have a new baby, and I think that's what we most often associate it with. But people also need it because they have a serious health issue and need to have treatment or surgery People need it because they have a loved one who they are trying to help as they're aging. People need it because they're trying to support a family member who has had a serious health event or surgery, because they're adopting a new child. Like, there's so many different ways that it affects all our lives. And I think especially in a state like Maine, where we're both trying to increase the demographics of younger workers in our state and also support older Mainers in our state, it's something that really helps people at all those stages, and also helps those of us who are stuck in the middle, where we might have young children and also aging family members that we're trying to help keep at home or help support as they get closer to the end of their lives. So I think that's one of the reasons why I think it's so important. I'd love to hear what you think, Representative.
No, Kathy, I think you've nailed it right on the head, right? I mean, in terms of what it means in real people's lives. I think that a lot of times what folks get confused about is how it is different than other kinds of leave. And so, for example, people know that we passed a paid time off law, right? And they ask, is it the same as that? And they know there's a federal FMLA law, and is it the same as that? And what's very different about a family medical leave plan is that it is a wage guarantee. And so it is the ability, separate from your employer, because it is run by the state or by the federal government, to, in an event, all the things that you listed, right? Everything from taking care of a parent to a health event of your own, or your child, or paternity leave, all of those things that could happen in a life, right? When you're driving home and you're worrying about what happens if I'm in a car accident, will my small business still be able to operate tomorrow? Will I be able to pay my mortgage, right? All of those sorts of things are the problems that family medical leave tries to address. And the way the system works is it is a very small portion of a payment every week or every month or that comes out of a paycheck pre-tax. So sort of like when you put away childcare or when you put away for health accounts, right? It comes out pre-tax generally. And what that allows you to do is when you have this health event, a portion, and that's the part that the LD seats to put forward this commission to try to figure out, right? A portion of your salary would be paid to you, whether or not you're with the employer that you were with, whether you move to another employer, whether you are the employer yourself, whether you are an independent contractor, or whether you are a freelancer at home. You can take part in a family medical leave plan and know that you will have income coming in when the worst that life has, or the best in the case of a child, lands in your life. And that is why it's so important. I think that people talk about, the different parts of a just society. And for me, anyway, I think there's 3 pillars to it, right? I think you have to have a guarantee of healthcare, and healthcare is a human right. I think you have to have housing guarantees, and housing as a human right, but you have to have a wage guarantee as well. You have to know that you will be able to continue to pay the bills absent of the paycheck that comes in. And we could talk a lot about why our system is set up this way, and maybe we'll do that in a little bit, but I think that the important part of it is to know that no matter what happens in your life, the little bit that you've put in each week means that you're going to be okay.
Thank you. James, did you want to add to that?
I'll just add a little bit. I mean, I think I agree with everything that Kathy and Representative Sylvester have said so far. I mean, I think the law that was passed recently, that will come into effect soon, that will give Mainers paid time off at the state level, is really useful for, especially for short-term contingencies. I think that's the kind of thing where, if folks have to take a day or 2 off work because they have flu or because their kid has to stay home from school for a couple of days, it's really valuable. One of the things that's really important, I think, about paid family and medical leave that we're talking about is that it's for much longer term situations. So those are, where you have to take, depending on how the policy is structured, it could be 12 weeks or 16 weeks, after the arrival of a new child. You need a significant amount of time for both the mother to recover from that in the case of a natural childbirth, or to welcome a child in the case of adoption. Or it could be that you have to look after someone with a chronic illness for a significant amount of time, and all those things need a longer period of leave than just the paid time off program we currently have.
Right. I think that COVID has really demonstrated, I mean, most of us have had, one or more of these issues that you're talking about at some point in our lives. If we haven't, we're an outlier. But COVID has really shown us particularly not only how, disruptions that may be in our lives or external just require lengths of leave that paid sick time is not responsive to. I think on that same theme with COVID, though, while it has shown us that it's maybe more important than ever before, I think that it also highlights some of the challenges with trying to be audacious.
I think, Dusty, you froze a little.
All right.
Yeah, you might need to repeat what you just said.
I'll
We
stop.
lost you at audacious.
We need to be thinking big about structural change, but structural change is scary, and it's scary in a time when so much is changing around us. But I think that actually COVID is the perfect opportunity to be really talking and thinking and digging into why we need a program like this. I think if anybody sort of particularly wants to pick up on that thread, the why now, I'm really interested in exploring that further.
Well, I think I'll jump in. I think that when you're talking about thinking big, right? What you're really talking about is, what do we wish was in place when this event had happened, right? More than we are thinking about what little can we do now to try to modify the event that we're in. And I think that, when you look at a program like this and how it would have helped people to be able to take leave with sick family members, to be able to take leave themselves, to not go to work and spread it, to, as the disease started, you have all of those vector points, right, that you could go back and think about it. But really, when you're talking about, and everybody will talk about the fiscal times that we're in, but in reality, what you're talking about is thinking, and I'll talk, the good analogy is the unemployment program, right? But what you're talking about is not being able to afford transmission oil, and so you're going to let your transmission fail, right? And these are the kinds of decisions that we make all the time in government, where we decide not to make the investment in infrastructure, in people, in technology, in program, because of the short-term expense, not even beginning to understand that the long-term expense will be much larger than that. And I mean, and when you look at the fact of, of the way that the unemployment program, which is a wage guarantee program, right? And so is in some ways analogous to family medical leave, except that it is tied directly to your employer and your wages in the same way that healthcare is, so that you lose your healthcare when you lose your employer. You see that department was so denuded that it did not have the functional capacity to fulfill its mission. And so this is the same sort of thing. If we're not going to put forward an effort, and I think that we've been very modest in what we've asked and the way that we've structured this bill. And I think that when the first sort of ticket, the sticker price of what a family medical leave plan in full cost, I think that a lot of folks, that's kind of when I got involved, to think about how could we structure this in such a way that we would guarantee, as much as anything like this is possible, that we were moving forward in a prudent way, and that every time we were investing dollars, we knew that we were going to get money back, right? And that's what this program is. It is a program that allows employers to keep employees, because they don't lose their home and go into a deep spiral on every health event, right? It's the sort of program that stabilizes society and allows for growth and allows for stable planning and allows for further investment, not the kind of program that drains away. You know, if you think about it like building roads, right? We're going to places that we can't get to right now. And family medical leave is a way to get to that sort of stable place where people feel that confidence, the kind of confidence that economists talk about when they're talking about buying homes or cars and all of these other things that build our economy.
Right. Or even the confidence to have children. You know, I had a conversation with a colleague a couple of years ago who was extremely well organized, but had a spreadsheet where she was counting out all of the sick days that she was saving up so that in 2 or 3 years she would be able to afford to have a baby. It absolutely blew my mind and broke my heart. But, you know, even apart from the feelings of it, the realization that this was somebody in the workforce who would like to have a child, was going to push off the date of having that child, therefore, you know, potentially adding to the risk, you know, just all kinds of things snowballing in that calculation about whether she would be able to continue her position in the workforce or begin to start a family. So those are the things we need to be investing in.
Yes, when I went out to Washington for a family medical leave plan conference, and we met with a farmer, you know, who said, you know, and it doesn't get much more Maine than a small farm. And she said, this allowed me, when they put in that plan, this allowed me to be able to get out of the field, to be able, in my business, to be able to have a child. And that was something that we did not see how we could spare my hands for any length of time financially to be able to have a child. And those are the kinds of things that we're talking about, that workers decide every day, the kinds of compromises that they make with their lives and their bills and their, you know, and trying to plan, you know, in complete uncertainty. And that's, you know, why I keep coming back to the idea, because I remember when I started my small business, I was driving home and, you know, a semi truck pulled right in front of me and I ended up inches away. And I, you know, and all those thoughts about the fact that I was supporting our family entirely by my own effort every day, you know, and what would happen if that could no longer go forward, right? If those few inches weren't there. And so that's why, you know, in my mind, that is the metaphor of family medical leave, is it's those few inches that allow you to plan and breathe and allow life to not sweep you up in uncertainty.
Kathy or James, I'm interested in if either of you have thoughts about that sort of that connection to COVID or thinking structurally during this time.
I mean, I would build on what Representative Sylvester was saying, that, you know, I think in a way, and from a larger economic standpoint, I think it's one of the things we can't afford to not be doing. So I think, you know, not having a paid family medical leave program in place, I think, you know, folks who have seen the 0 Weeks movie that I know the Women's Lobby has been showing and has also been available in a bunch of places will know and will have seen elsewhere that, you know, the United States is one of the few countries in the world that doesn't have a national paid family leave system. And one of the reasons why, you know, places all over the world have adopted a system, and why many states are doing it now, is because it just makes so much sense, I think, both from sort of a moral and social standpoint, but also from an economic standpoint. It's one of the things that, you know, especially allows women to stay in the workforce when they want to, and sort of improves women's economic prospects over the long term. That's one of the things that the US is doing particularly badly right now. And I think we see this in the jobs numbers in the COVID recession that we're in right now, is that, you know, as we're all staying home and children are home from school, there's more illness going around, and just all those pressures are falling onto women in the household particularly, and women are much more likely to be dropping out of the workforce and being asked to take on that burden. And that's something that goes on all the time, even in non-pandemic times, and that's just made so much worse when there isn't this safety net to help folks be able to continue drawing an income and ultimately staying connected to their job through those events.
And I'll just tag on James real quick that, you know, when you're talking about the racial disparities and when you look at the racial outcomes of COVID, you know, it's because of the workforce jobs that, you know, people of color are in the service sector, are in jobs where they don't have the ability to stay at home, where they don't have the ability to have had a safety net to not be out in the public and working and bringing home a paycheck. And I think that, you know, even in the, you know, when we're looking at, I believe that the Family Medical Leave Plan will have huge impact amongst people of color in being able to make up the gap that is there, because so many times that those single life events are the things that set back a family of color. You know, particularly, you know, with new Mainers, with, you know, with folks who are trying to build a life out of nothing, who, you know, and I think that it really is the ability to, you know, we talk about it a lot in this country about, you know, the even playing field, but this is one of those things when I talk about those pillars, right, that creates an even playing field for everyone. And if you can't leave a job because of your health care or you don't have a wage guarantee, if you can't go and seek medical care because you can't afford to, right? All of those things are the transmission fluid that ends up ultimately, you know, ruining the car of your life.
Yeah, I totally agree. And just, it's also in the interest of our public health to do this, especially, I think COVID has shown that very clearly, right? We know that people who have been exposed, people who have symptoms, who test positive, should be quarantining for at least 14 days. And we also know that many people who have gotten COVID end up being sick for much longer and sometimes have recurrences of COVID. It's not in our public health interest collectively to have people going to work when they're sick, because they either have no leave, no paid time off, or because they don't have enough. And most people don't have 14 days of paid sick time, even if they have paid sick time. Low wage workers usually don't have paid sick time, and though we just passed a law last year that will help fix that for many Mainers, it's not going to be perfect. But we need to have people have access to something that gives them this longer time if we're going to have something like COVID in our lives. And it looks like we will, at least through the rest of this year, likely through next year. We never know when a similar type of pandemic could hit us. So it's in our interest to make sure people have what they need to not go to work when they're sick, whether that's sick time or something like this with paid leave. And then the piece about schools, I think, is just so critical. There was, as many people know, federal legislation to address some of the needs of families. And while our FMLA federally is unpaid, there was legislation that did provide parents and caregivers a certain amount of access to paid leave for a portion of their wages if they had a child care provider or school close. Unfortunately, many businesses were excluded from that, either because they were too large or because they were too small. So it doesn't protect everyone, but it was really, I know I've spoken to people for whom it was like really family saving, that they had the ability even just to take some of that time, not necessarily even all the time available to them, to figure out a new plan, to figure out what to do when everything shut down. And also when everything started to reopen, but maybe their child care provider hadn't reopened yet or schools were still not available. So I think there's so many lessons that we can take from this moment. And the last thing I'll just point out is James mentioned how other countries, we're one of the only countries in the world that doesn't have some sort of paid leave. That's also part of the reason why some countries were better able to weather the storm of shutting down, and their economic crisis, while still large, isn't necessarily harming people the way it is here in the United States, because people who had access to paid time off and paid leave and had some ability to stay home could do that safely and without worrying that it was going to send their family into a financial free fall.
Mm. That connection with other systems is especially interesting to me, you know, like the public health system, or also you mentioned childcare system. Actually, we have a real crisis in general pre-COVID around childcare. It's very hard to access. It's very expensive in certain markets, many markets. And infant care is particularly hard. If there wasn't such a rush for folks to get back to work, if they were able to stay home with their infant, that would alleviate some of the pressure on the child care system. We see that with other kinds of direct care as well. We have a really powerful story from a gentleman who had to leave work in order to care for his wife with dementia because he wasn't able, I mean, he wanted to do that. Also, he wasn't able to access additional direct care support, both because of the limited access to that resource, you know, because there are not as many direct care workers as there is need, and it's very expensive. So it intersects with all of the, you know, public health system and public school system, et cetera.
Yeah, I'll just add to that, Dusty, if it's okay, that maybe people don't know that about a quarter of people who give birth have to go back to work within 10 days of giving birth. That is just horrifying to me, whether, no matter what method you use for giving birth, your body has not recovered in 10 days. You're not signed off to do a whole lot of things, but people are expected to go back to work. And we also know that that affects the outcomes for infants as well. It decreases their ability to breastfeed. It decreases, it can put them more at risk of illness early in life if they have to go to childcare. And as you said, for many people, infant care is just not even an option because it's either too expensive or it's just not available.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And if you flip to the other side of life, you see people who are forced out of their homes into institutions because their family is not able to provide care. People who are pushed into hospice earlier than they would have normally been. You know, and all of those options are options that are not only, you know, in my mind, unjust for people who are at the end of their life and are seeking dignity, but are also, you know, economically disastrous in terms of a system trying to provide that care, that level of care for someone who may not need it yet, but doesn't have a worker in the workforce who is able to take leave. And we have unpaid FMLA, but I think as we've been pointing out, there's not a lot of folks who can afford to take unpaid leave in order to do that. And I think that, you know, that's the piece that's missing.
Let's talk a little bit about LD 1410. I think we know now that how the legislature will complete its session is up in the air. But we do have a bill on the table should the legislature decide to convene for a short session. And LD 1410 establishes a commission to create essentially a proposed paid family leave system for Maine, and to do so with a variety of voices at the table, and looking at issues like geographic need, like equity, taking into account public comment. Representative Sylvester, do you want to talk a bit about LD 1410, or
Sure.
why the commission kind of came to be, how this idea was part of the solution?
Sure, no problem. So as I said, so first of all, let's just start by saying that this is Speaker Gideon's bill, you know, and this was her vision to bring a family medical leave plan in this session. And I think that, you know, as the chair of labor, or the House chair of labor, I was brought in on the bill when we started to run into some obstacles. And I think that one of the things that happened along the way was a decision that we had to stop sort of thinking about obstacle thinking, right? So like, how do we get around this? How do we get over that? Why do we, right? You know, and to really think about how can we create the most just system, right? So for example, a system that can pay people in a timely fashion so that, you know, as we've seen with unemployment, right? So that they can actually access the benefit, right? Because if you're going to take family medical leave plan, but it takes 3 weeks to get to you, it doesn't help you, right? To think about racial disparities, to think about, right? So all of these things that other states have done and have proven that you can do, right? But that Maine will have its own independent, you know, its own individual problems to figure out, and its own individual solutions, and its own individual, resources to bring to the table that other states won't have. And so in thinking about how to do that, other states, for example, Washington, had set up such a commission. And it was a commission that was business, that was advocates of family medical leave, that was labor, right? And I think that's really important to understand, is that, you know, in states where this has been successful, it's come about in two ways. One is this Washington model, where this coalition of people, you know, because a lot of times when we were talking, like when we were talking about the paid time off, business feels like they're paying for something, but family medical leave includes the business owner, includes the managers, includes that, right? This is not something that is worker versus business, right? This is something that includes all citizens, right, in all walks of life. And so, so I think that that's important, that we have those voices at the table. And the other way that it came about, it was as a part of the unemployment program already, right? And so, so when you're talking about it as a system, it's not really creating something that nobody's ever seen before, right? But what we have to figure out is how it works for Maine. And I think one of the biggest pieces that we have to do is that outreach, so that we know there are businesses that will be opposed to any kind of social program no matter what happens. But most of Maine's businesses are small businesses. People who run small businesses are workers. They work 60 to 80 hours a week. They have the same problems as their employees. They work in the trenches alongside them. And I think that the same problems that will help their workers are things that they're going to be willing to roll up their sleeves and try to help us figure out how we put this together. And because it will not be successful if we continue down a road where, you know, there's this split, it becomes a partisan issue, or it becomes a worker business issue, or it becomes, you know, any sort of those splits, right? It's not going to happen, right? We need to do that outreach to have all voices at the table, so that when we're done, we have all voices explaining how it works, right, in all the different communities, but also to be able to, you know, fix the problems as they come up, right? And I can talk a lot more about that in a minute, but basically the law works like this. It's set up in stages so that the commission comes in and they have to solve a few problems before they can move on to the next round, right? So it's sort of like a reality TV show, right? You have to meet these 3 problems in order to get to the next round of you know, figuring out how to implement the plan. And the things that the bill looks to do is to be able to do a study, both an actuary study as well as a study of you know, what other states have done. And I'll say that the governor has put this program in Hannah Pingree's Department of Innovation, right, which is exactly where I think it belongs. Because when you're creating something new, you're talking about new Mainers, and you're talking about high-tech companies, and you're talking, you know, all of the things that department is looking at. And, you know, and really what we're trying to figure out is, what do Mainers need? How do we explain it to them? How do we make sure that they want it, right? And prove that to folks, right? And then we're worrying about how to pay for it. But I think that the payment piece, we have a pretty good strategy for. You know, I think we could have moved one step further and had a hard trigger for implementation. But this was the way that everybody felt comfortable going forward at that time, in order to, you know, make sure that we had it right and to move it in the 1/30th And that's what one of the things that the commission has is the ability to move forward a piece of legislation that will trigger a real family medical leave plan. Does that make sense? Does that answer some of the questions? I didn't want to go on for, this is, as you said, this is something it took many forms. It was a long time coming up with the document that we have right now. But the ability, really, it's an organizing tool to bring everybody that needs to be at the table to the table, to be able to, because there's never a shortage of people who we have shortages of everything in government all the time. That's all we want to talk about. We never have a shortage of people who will tell you why something will fail. And we never have a shortage of people who will, say that something is crazy. So, we need to find those people in all of these different avenues who are willing to roll up their sleeves. Big business, small business, farmers, workers, advocates, legal folks, tech folks, right? We need them all.
Nice. Kathy or James, do either of you have anything that you want to add to the conversation about LD 1410 or the commission?
The only thing I would add is just, I think that the process of looking at like what can work and how can we do this is a really worthwhile one, because I think the evidence is overwhelming from what other states have done that this is doable and it can be done, and it isn't crazy to think that it can be done. And so I think going through that process with the right people at the table so that a range of voices are able to say that is really important. So that, I think, is one of the pluses of this approach. Of course, it would be wonderful to have paid leave right now for everybody, but since that wasn't going to happen in this moment in time, building the case for it, I think, makes a lot of sense.
And it's an organizing tool, Kathy, right? I mean, really what it is an ability to have a conversation with the state of Maine, right? And I think that there's a lot of facts and there's a lot of, strategies, and there's a lot of lessons to be learned now that Washington has been running for so long and Oregon's getting ready to implement. And right, I think that all of that is out there to parse, but this is not a commission that comes out with a study that goes in a draw, right? This is an organizing tool. And if we fail to use it as such, then that's on us.
James, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, I think I would just add that, we sort of mentioned this, I think that, this started off as a bill that Speaker Gideon put in and obviously supports and supports the study commission. And also, I think, there've been conversations with the governor's office, and the governor is supportive of the idea of the commission, which is now the version of the bill. And it's helping to provide, potentially provide funding and housing that at her Office of Innovation. So I think, it's important for all of us to keep this momentum up and to, make sure that, one thing that obviously that's critical is that, this was one of the bills that was carried over when the legislature adjourned in March. And so we need the special session of the legislature to have this passed, or the bill will die and we'll have to start again from scratch in January. So I think anyone who's interested in, seeing this move ahead and seeing us, get towards a paid family leave program should be reaching out to their state representatives and to the governor and sort of making the case that we need to have a special session to get important pieces of legislation like this passed.
I mean, I think that's really like that. So that's where it's at now, like where the rubber hits the road. It matters. We need it to happen. We have a great vehicle with widespread support. How do we get it into a special session? So I think, James has suggested that folks should be reaching out to the governor, reaching out to their legislators. Are there other ways that people can be kind of raising the profile of how important this issue is now?
Well, that's the only two ways we get in is through the legislature or the governor. And it's clear that the Republicans are unwilling to go on the record about whether or not they want to have a special session. So I think that at this point we're looking to the governor to call us back, which is something that has happened numerous times. And I think that people really wanted to have the legislature be able to put on their big legislator pants and make this decision themselves. but it seems like we're unable to do that. And I think, you know, I think that it's one of the challenges that, you know, as I enter, you know, my third term, I'm going to be looking at, you know, very closely is thinking about that split in the parties, right? And why these sorts of discussions happen, and why when we have these discussions, which are really, you know, discussions of hope, discussions of justice, discussions of ideas, right? Why, depending on who brings it forward, one party or the other are unwilling to engage. But at this moment, the governor seems to be the one who can call us in. She has the power to do that. Certainly Governor LePage did that. Certainly, you know, it can happen, and there's a long precedent of it happening. And it does not seem the legislature will call itself in. And so I would say that reaching out to the governor at this point is key. You know, saying that, you know, we have all, you know, we basically have till January to solve this problem. And so I think that, you know, as we're looking at health outcomes and we're looking at all of these things, you know, as one of the people who'll be sitting in that chair with a mask, you know, I have my own concerns, right? But the reality is that there's work that needs to get done. And, you know, and so I'm hopeful that the governor will bring us back, you know, maybe September. And, you know, and we can finish up the slate of bills.
That is one of the questions we have from Facebook is, you know, how will the refusal to convene a special session affect paid family and medical leave? Which I think we've addressed, but that's the short story. If they don't come back and vote on it, then this bill goes nowhere and we start again.
Yep.
So those messages to the governor.
The one other thing, Desi, you asked was like, how can we lift this up for folks? And certainly contacting the governor, contacting our own legislators is really important, and everyone should be doing that. And also everybody should be contacting members of our congressional delegation as well, because there are opportunities to improve upon the COVID paid leave, emergency paid leave that they passed. And hopefully there will be at some point energy to do something at a national level. But I also think it's important for people, if they have a story, their own experience, whether it's connected to COVID-19, whether it's connected to a life event in their own lives, to share those stories if they feel comfortable writing a letter to the editor or sharing it on your storyboard.
I'd also encourage people, you know, if they want to write me as the House Chair of Labor, you know, I'm happy to, you know, to collect those. And it's mike.sylvester@legislature.maine.gov. And, you know, you can Google it and find my cell phone and all of those sorts of information that's out there. If you, however you want to get it to me, text it to me, Facebook it to me, whatever. But, you know, like, that's what we need to do, is we need to prove a couple things. People want it, people understand it, and, you know, and that people need it. And I think that's an easy get if we do the work and we get out there. And so, if you own a small business, if you, you know, if you're a worker, if you're, you know, a manager in a big company, we need to hear from all of you. And we need to hear from my dog outside hassling somebody, so I'll be right back.
Well, and something that occurred to me is, especially talking about the federal level, is I think because it's such a compelling issue, and I expect especially now with everything that we've seen around the COVID pandemic, you know, even before that, it's becoming a growing bipartisan issue as well. So this isn't just something that like Democratic-led lawmakers support, but, you know, there have been members of the Trump administration who have supported the idea of a paid family medical leave plan. You know, Ivanka Trump is one of those. And so I think, you know, reaching out to people of all political persuasions is really important, and also sort of continuing to build this coalition that, as we've talked about, isn't just about sort of workers versus business owners or Democrats versus Republicans, but is something that, you know, it has a lot of support among folks from all walks of life and is of benefit to everybody, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Right. And we do have on the table in the HEROES Act, which was passed by the House at the federal level, what, 86 days ago or something, that extends the current provisions for COVID for paid family and medical leave. It's under fairly limited circumstances, and yet it is also an important extension that could help people right now if we're able to pass the HEROES Act. Representative Sylvester, did you have a comment?
Oh no, I was just going to bring that up. You know, you read my mind, right? I mean, there's federal legislation, and I think it's interesting the way that it's rolling out right now. The federal legislation foresees this working through the Social Security Department, and sees it as a benefit, very much like Social Security, where you earn it, you pay for it, you earn it, you apply for it, right? And I think that one of the things that the committee that's been overseeing this has, you know, asked us when we were able to speak to them at the convention that I went to, and then you know, is that the states have really wrestled with these justice problems, with these equity problems, with making sure that everybody is covered, with making sure that it works for you know, everybody, you know, from all walks of life, and that, you know, and things like being able timely payment and those sorts of things that would keep low-wage workers from being able to access the benefit may not happen at the federal level if it's instituted in the Social Security. And so so one of the things that the commission will have the benefit of is being able to hear people's stories and being able to get people's opinions as we bring forward ideas to aid the federal legislation. Because the House committee anyway is really interested in hearing those stories and making sure that the best parts of the state programs, that either the federal program is an adjuvant to that, right? So if the state offers better benefits than what the federal program will, that those are able to continue, and that the federal program will help support that. You know, and so those are all interesting things at the federal level. But, you know, in terms of the implementation, you know, what Social Security knows how to do is take your money, figure out if you're eligible for it, and then pay you, right, in a timely fashion. And so it's sort of an interesting place for it to go. Probably the most administrative piece of government, but you know, we need to make sure that that we're looking at the justice elements.
Wonderful. Well, let me just draw folks' attention. I'm going to share my screen briefly and bring it back to mainfamilyleave.com. There's information on this website about both our coalition, also about LD 1410, information about how folks can take action. They can ask representatives, you know, put your name in there and send a note directly to the governor and your representative asking for a special session to be convened. Also, a range of information. If you heard something that surprised you tonight, then you can look it up. There are citations for all of these stats. Some really powerful stories about the need for paid family leave here in Maine. And an opportunity for people to share their own stories. So I invite people to go take a look, to get involved, to take action. You can sign up to get regular updates from the coalition. And otherwise, think about how we can make this part of our infrastructure in Maine. It's really important for our communities. Any last comments from the group?
I would also just encourage folks, I know that the Women's Lobby has been showing, as James mentioned, many screenings of 0 Weeks, which is a documentary about this issue. But if you haven't had a chance to see it yet, I really encourage you to watch it either one of the times that the Women's Lobby shows it or through another channel. But it's really powerful and shares a lot of helpful information that I think it helps people figure out, like, how do we talk about this issue? What are some things that I can say? And you can hear lots of different people talk about this issue and learn from how they talk about it. And that's one of the really great things I think about that film. So it's really worth your time if you haven't yet been able to watch it. It's really powerful.
Jesse, I just want to thank you for moderating this and for you know, for making this event happen. I think that, you know, it's easy in a time like this to sort of give up hope and put your head down and, you know, and try to make it to the next day. But I think we don't make it to the next day, you know, if we don't really put our hands together and keep our dreams and hopes alive. If we don't keep fighting for those things that make life worth living. And, you know, and certainly the Women's Lobby has been, that has been your dream and your goal since you were formed. And, you know, and we appreciate all of the work that you're doing and, you know, on family medical leave and all the many issues that you work on.
Oh, well, thank you. That's very kind. Well, I thank you all. I know that this is not the place that you were dreaming to be, back on Zoom at 7. And so just thank you so much for being willing to take the time and have this conversation and contribute your incredible knowledge and expertise for this important community benefit. So
thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
all right, thank you. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.